Really pleased to be here this morning. And when I was asked to speak here, I thought about what the right set of topics might be. And I recognize that this community, just like my own throughout the department, is wrestling with challenges of technology and technological innovation, the pace of change, and the changing world environment that we find ourselves in. And I wanted to talk a little bit today about how the department's looking at those problems, how it's impacting our strategy, and some of the tools that we're looking at to help change the way we think about technology, the way we procure technology, the way we deploy technology. So let me just quickly start by talking just briefly about our overall research and engineering strategy at DoD. We see three major themes that we have to address as a department. First, and of course, always, we have to worry about the current fight and about those things that are in front of us. We have to mitigate both the current threat and the things that are informed by our understanding of intelligence, of the trajectory of threats globally. We have to be aware and continuously evolving the capacity that our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines use to ensure that they have dominant capability on any battlefield. But a theme that we've added is really the focus on affordability. Because if I wanted to point to a threat to our future capabilities, it's not the lack of innovation, but quite frankly, it's the lack of resources. And that focus on affordability has to be part of everything we do. We have to emphasize new ways to deliver capability faster and much more cost-effectively than we have in the past. And there are technologies that can help us fundamentally change the slope of the curve that we're on in terms of capability delivery. And then finally, a major piece of our investment is focused on disruptive capabilities. Those fundamentally disruptive areas where new capabilities will change the nature of military competition, where we can create technological surprise for our potential adversaries, and where we can ensure that our nation is first to technological capabilities so we are never surprised. And so those three themes define almost everything we do in the department in terms of our technology investments. But we're at an interesting crossroads in history, in my mind, where we've had, as a nation and with our partners and allies, really a 40-year run where we've had technological capabilities that no other nation could deploy. Our combination of capacity in terms of precision weapons, in terms of stealth, in terms of the amazing ISR capabilities that we're capable of deploying that allow us to provide precision targeting deep, that support very efficient power projection and flow of forces, have been a unique definer of U.S. capabilities. They were born out of the Cold War and focused on addressing the challenge of the Soviet Union, but they've served us capably in every fight we've had since. But there's no fundamental guarantee that those capabilities will always be a U.S. advantage. And over the last 40 years, since the 70s, folks have studied the way we fight and have now begun to invest in capabilities that are fundamentally symmetrical with the U.S. way of war. And that has driven a fundamental rethink about our strategy, our investments, the choices we're making to restore that advantage. And it's not surprising to see other countries beginning to invest in capabilities like the U.S. has. We've seen globalization in technology in the commercial sector, and now we see it in defense. We see global access to technology and global supply chains. We've seen the globalization of talent as folks have studied our universities and gone home. We've now seen available GDP in a number of foreign and highly capable countries that they can invest in modernizing their military capabilities, and they are doing so at a remarkably fast pace. It leverages both the traditional military technologies and the growing commercial technology that's available to all comers. And finally, we find ourselves often on the wrong side of a cost and capability curve, where our speed to delivery and the cost of delivery hinders us, while others have been able to demonstrate much faster time to get capability and range. And so we are fundamentally looking at innovation as a way to address this change in the strategic landscape. You hear a lot of discussion about innovation in Washington, and I think innovation for innovation's sake is a waste of breath. We really see a burning platform that's focusing our attention, and that is how do we ensure in the current technological environment, in the current global national security competitive environment, sustained capability advantage for U.S. forces. That's why we're so focused on innovation as a theme. You've heard the department talking about focus on leveraging all sources of innovation opportunity. I know there's been some discussion about efforts like our Defense Innovation Unit Experimental, our outpost in Silicon Valley. The Secretary was out on the West Coast last week and announced opening of a Boston location to grow our footprint in innovation communities across the country. But that's just one potential source of innovation opportunity, and we don't expect that folks are building the next breakthrough in fighter aircraft or what's going to replace an aircraft carrier in a garage somewhere in Oakland. But we're concerned about not missing those commercial sector capabilities that might have influence on our capabilities. But we're also investing and refocusing on innovation internally, on our laboratories and our engagements with universities and our traditional supplier base, which has been a source of enormous innovation over time. We're doing everything we can to speed delivery of capabilities because time to market matters in the national security space just as it does in the commercial space. We're trying to find new ways to speed capability from our laboratories and from research centers to get into the hand of soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, to get folks to experiment with things faster, to leverage prototypes as a way to accelerate our process of discovery. And all of this is feeding an ongoing discussion about strategy. You've heard in Tish's opening, you heard a deputy and the secretary talking about offsets, and offsets are really a way to think about strategic competition where one finds themselves in a symmetrical competition, where one has an advantage and one's competitor has advantages that are symmetrical to yours. And an offset is about changing the lay of the landscape, of moving that competition from areas where you might be disadvantaged to areas where you might have and the ability to create fundamental and sustainable advantage. We're talking about changing competition rather than just engaging in direct competition in areas where adversaries are investing. And it's about trying to think about advantage that the United States can sustain over long periods of time. What are our fundamental technical capabilities? What are our fundamental manufacturing capabilities? What are the unique properties of our military system that enables our soldiers to be able to fight differently and better than anyone else? And this is not a new approach. This is a theme that the department has exercised before. Back in the 50s, facing numerical superiority of Soviet forces in Europe, President Eisenhower adopted tactical nuclear weapons as a fundamentally differentiating capability. At the time, the United States had an advantage in nuclear capabilities that nobody else had, and the introduction of those tactical nuclear weapons in Europe provided an offset. It changed the shape of competition with the Soviet Union. Rather than matching them tank for tank, man for man, in an area where we would have been disadvantaged, we reshaped that competition along new lines. Today, those proliferation of nuclear weapons seems crazy in our current environment, but at the time, it was a fundamental game changer. But over time, as we started to get into the 70s and 80s, the Soviet Union had its own nuclear capabilities at the tactical level, and so it was no longer a differentiator. Emerging in the 70s and 80s was the emergence of the ISR strike complex, the ability of the NATO follow-on forces strategy, the notion of air-land combat in our own doctrine, tying the ability to project power from precision weapons tied to geospatial intelligence, real-time ISR collection, the ability to process those feeds in near real time, be able to push that over networks directly to warfighters engaged, the tools that we now recognize that we have deployed since that time frame. And that was a fundamental game changer. No other nation could deliver that complex set of capabilities in the integrated way the United States did. And it provided a means of conventional deterrence that has stood us for 40 years. If I go back and think about military history, there's really not been a 40-year sustained military advantage kind of since the longbow. And so we've had a remarkable run of owning that capability. And it's not surprising that now we need to be thinking harder about what replaces it. How do we begin to disrupt ourselves before others can disrupt us? And so that's why you see a discussion going on in the department about a third offset strategy. I tell folks that the third offset strategy is not a document that's sitting in a drawer in my desk. It's really an ambition. It's a desire to help shape those strategic activities going on across the department, the way that the services are investing, the things that we prioritize within our S&T environment, the things that we're doing in our wargaming, and the experimentation that's going on out in the field in the fleet, to think about new ways of fighting, of new capabilities that can provide sustained advantage. The deputy and secretary have been very vocal about this. The deputy has a set of topics that he talks about. They're projected behind me. And one of the topics that we're very focused on is the emerging science of autonomy and the capabilities that are emerging from commercial and government investments in artificial intelligence. Dee and I talked about some of these just a few moments ago. And we see that there's opportunities to think about those capabilities in fundamentally new ways. Not just as autonomous machines, but as partners to our capable soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, to allow them to extend their capabilities, to be a force multiplier, to change the way we fight. And we're thinking hard about our investments in autonomous learning systems, in human-machine collaboration, in ways to utilize autonomous, semi-autonomous capabilities to enable human operations in new ways. And to couple those together in environments where we see the threat, significant threat from cyber and electronic warfare in the future. Thinking about how autonomy and independent decision-making can allow systems to survive in a network-degraded environment is a key piece of our thinking. This is, there's been a lot of kind of pushback on this from folks who've imagined kind of the Arnold Schwarzenegger movies that we've seen, these kind of Terminator things. None of that's our ambition. Our focus is not on a new generation of lethal systems, but instead thinking about how autonomy enables the way we do business, enables us to do business fundamentally differently. Our policies do not allow us to remove humans from those critical decision-making points associated with delivery of lethal force. And I think that's a straw man argument that's fundamentally separate from the things we're trying to do, which are thinking about how emerging capabilities, new software-enabled capabilities, might allow us to do capabilities faster. 2 weeks ago, I was out at Portland with the Deputy Secretary for the christening of the DARPA ACTUV ship, and I apologize, I don't have the video to show you today. It's a remarkable vessel. It's a trimaran hull, painted navy gray. But there is no place for a pilot to sit on the ship. It's a 180-ton displacement boat, 170 foot long. There's no human accessible spaces in this boat except for some repairways. Triple redundant, fully autonomous ship that could leave port here in the United States and find its way, say, to Bahrain on a single tank of gas and radio in for a pilot to bring it into port. It's a fundamental game changer to think about those kind of capabilities. It's equipped with a very capable sonar system as an example of the military capabilities that autonomous systems might have. A few years ago when I was at DARPA, we were working on the grand challenge for autonomous ground vehicles. We were trying to encourage with prize authorities folks to be able to build a ground vehicle that could drive from Los Angeles to Las Vegas. The first year we did that, nobody could complete that course. 2 years later when we came back, several vehicles were able to do that. And each of those teams disappeared into the commercial ecosystem and became the center of the enormous revolution in autonomous vehicles you see going on. And then last week I was in Mountain View, stuck behind one of those unmanned Google cars doing exactly 25 miles an hour and wishing that I'd never been involved in this. But these things are coming. They're coming from the commercial sector. They're coming, and they're going to have enormous influence on military capabilities. And we're trying to increase our pace of experimentation, help understand how that's going to change the way we fight. But one of the keys that underpins this, we often talk about geospatial data as foundational. We think about it as a foundational product on which we overlay other intelligence. But it's a foundational product in which these autonomous systems will engage with the real world. That data representation of the environments in which these vehicles will operate is going to be critical to the coming revolution in autonomous systems. And I think that's a fundamental game changer, and it's a challenge to this community to think about how we provide the quality and updates on products that we're going to increasingly be demanded for systems that need to operate and navigate in complex 3D environments. As we understand those kind of systems and how dependent they are on training data and on foundational data, trying to build trust with users and understand how trust in data drives trust in systems as we start to merge the physical and data spaces, I think is going to become increasingly important. Thinking about validation, verification in new ways. What does test mean in these kind of environments where the environment changes, the data changes? All of these, I think, represent new challenges both for the department and, of course, for our joint communities as we think about both the commercial and dedicated government products that might support these activities. So the department is not thinking about the strategy as kind of a single layer. I mentioned the autonomous piece, but of course we're looking at lots of other sources of technical innovation, many of which we're not talking about in public. But we're seeking kind of this right combination of technology, operational and organizational construct that might allow us to provide a new way of ensuring U.S. dominance in the future. We're really trying to preserve our ability to have a conventional deterrent that allows us to go where we need to go, to be able to project power in the face of anti-access zero denial capabilities, to allow us to be able to maintain U.S. capacity for conventional deterrence against all potential adversaries. We do that with people. And I just wanted to pivot for a moment and talk a little bit about some of the things we're doing internally to try and ensure that we can deliver these capabilities in the future. The department invests an enormous amount of human capital in technology. I lead a workforce of over 113,000 professional scientists and engineers in our laboratories, in our development centers, and across the department who get up every day thinking about that future, thinking about how they can design and deliver products that'll make a difference. We're engaged with traditional and non-traditional industry, increasingly reaching out to non-traditional industry, not just because we think that's a missed opportunity for technological capabilities, but also because it's a community that doesn't look to the department often as an adjacent market. They don't see us as a place to come play. We're trying to be a friendlier audience for those commercial capabilities. And then finally, we're of course engaged internationally and increasingly focused on how we get value from those international engagements rather than just do them for the sake of doing them. The DoD research enterprise is spread across the country. Behind me you can see the locations of our major laboratory facilities, our major test ranges, and the circles represent our multidisciplinary university research centers. I'm very excited about these. These are areas where we're breaking down the traditional silos of departments in universities and getting folks to work together across departments. That's where the action is. It's between disciplines. It's not in traditional disciplines. And the department has been very active in engaging and standing up these centers. And these centers are graduating new classes of graduate students who think differently. They're not thinking about kind of academic achievement in their traditional fields. They're thinking about those intersections of autonomy and data and thinking about learning systems and how that impacts biology. All these very interesting nexus of fervent technical development. We're trying to seed some of that and trying to capture some of their interest in defense problems. We also are deeply engaged worldwide. I think this is something that folks often don't realize. But we, of course, have presence in Europe, Asia, in South America, and of course the teams that are deployed all over Africa, not just doing technical engagement, but of course in Africa I also own all the folks who are doing reconnaissance, hoping to identify bio threats before they show up on our doorstep. An enormous engagement worldwide, and one that I think is paying off dramatically. We are today touching not just the smartest researchers in U.S. universities, but in fact have engagements globally. And we have some very exciting programs where we are funding U.S. researchers here at home, and host nations are funding researchers within their own countries to do international collaborations as a single team under kind of a single construct in a way that I think is going to have enormous benefits. So to implement this vision, we're trying to open our aperture. We're trying to think about new ways to reach out for technology. We're also trying to find new ways to reach out to people who often don't think of Defense Department as a potential place where they might come engage. Just as Director Clapper talked about, we are thinking about ways to flex in new ways from a people perspective as well. This current generation doesn't see a 30-year career in a DoD laboratory as an attractive place to be. Folks are interested in kind of moving in and out of government, of chasing opportunity rather than stability. And we're trying to find ways to flex our system to allow that to happen. We've actually been very successful in bringing in some remarkably bright folks you normally wouldn't see kind of wandering the E-ring of the Pentagon, interestingly tattooed and pierced folks, but it's okay. The value of the ideas that they bring to the table is fantastic, and we're trying to reach out to communities that often have not thought about the department as a player. But people often talk about the need to kind of surf the coming wave of technology. But you can't surf a wave unless you've paddled out in front of it, unless you've positioned yourself to take advantage of the opportunity that's coming. And that's why we're so focused on ensuring we've got the right capacity in-house, that we've got the right technical talent, that we've got the right folks in-house to be able to ensure that we recognize those opportunities when they come. And of all the things I've talked about, that's the one that keeps me up at night. I worry the most about our ability to retain and attract those folks who are on the cutting edge. I worry about our ability to compete with the private sector. I don't have the flexibility in terms of compensation. All I have is an interesting mission. And an interesting mission has attracted folks, the ability to work in our facilities, to work with our amazing researchers as it continues to attract folks. But I worry about particular domains, artificial intelligence, robotics, emerging capabilities in synthetic biology, where quite frankly, we simply can't compete with the giant novelty checks that folks are able to present to the cutting edge researchers. And so we're thinking harder about how we can find ways to make ourselves more attractive, or ways that we can in fact flex and compete for talent. You may have seen the discussion about the Force of the Future, the set of initiatives that the Secretary proposed to help shape our future personnel system. Of all those initiatives, and many of them were received in interesting ways by the Hill and by others, I was most interested in some of the ones that got the least attention. The Force of the Future initiatives, for the first time, talked about talent rather than kind of workforce and numbers. And I'm after those A students. I'm focused on how the department gets talent on board. And things like, that were way down in the fine print of that, our ability to use commercial recruiters, for example, to go out and identify talent and try and attract them to the department. Those are the tools we're going to need to use. The people I want to bring on board have good jobs already. I've got to talk them out of it and convince them why they want to come join us. That's a very different approach to what the department's usual personnel practices, posting some job on USA Jobs and hoping that some Nobel Prize winner happens to be trolling it looking for something to do. We have to be more aggressive and think about talent differently, and I'm excited to see the department finally having that conversation. Behind me, I've got a list of the kind of key areas that we've upped our investment in. In the 17 President's budget request, we moved about $18 billion worth of funding across the Future Year Defense Plan to address topics associated with the third offset strategy that are fundamentally disruptive. We've made major investments in hypersonics. I believe that directed energy is now getting out of the lab, and we're going to see some really interesting applications in the near term. I'm very excited about emerging capabilities in biomedical and in areas that people often don't think of. We think about therapeutics, but the wearable device market, those Fitbits that probably many of you are wearing, generations or two past that, I think have enormous opportunities for us to be able to understand health and fitness of our personnel, be able to understand alertness and ability to react, to help make folks more resilient to stress. And those capabilities, I think, are really emerging at a remarkable pace. And of course, autonomy and robotics, which I talked about earlier. I think you'll see the department upping its gain in all these areas, and our communities of interest that focus across the services laboratories are highly focused on this list. But there are three things that we're emphasizing most particularly kind of as a cross-cutting activities across the department. Those are speed to market, prototyping, demonstration, experimentation, and then our commitment to the future through STEM. And I'm just going to touch all three of these before I finish. Speed matters. In the commercial sector, there's folks are focused on first mover advantage. The first person to the marketplace has enormous advantages over those who get there later. And that's true in the national security sector as well. Our ability to be first to a technology, to be able to exploit that capability faster than others is an enormous advantage. I've testified in the Hill that I do not expect to see in the future any more decadal development programs. A 20-year development program for a military capability is 20 years that an adversary has to build countermeasures before we deploy it. We're going to have to think about how we deliver capability faster. And there's been a lot of support on the Hill for things like modular open system architectures, of delivering increased capability through software, of thinking about new contracting mechanisms that might allow us to deliver capability faster, and we're trying to exploit all these. We're also very focused on prototyping. In an era where we're not going to have the resources necessary to procure large numbers of kind of serial production of systems, we need to think about new ways to buy. And we've been increasing our gain on prototyping and experimentation, of being able to take systems from the field, to be able to instantiate them in prototypes that look like something a user might be able to put their hands on, and giving those to the fleet. That unmanned ship that I talked about earlier left Portland and is now in the port of San Diego, where for the next 2 years it'll experiment with the Navy and start to develop tactics, start to engage requirements developers, and start to inform future capabilities that technology might enable. And then finally, the last thing I wanted to mention today was our engagement on the future. We have major programs focused on trying to touch the next generation of young people, to engage them in science, technology, engineering, math, to communicate how important those kind of careers are, to inspire them to think about careers in these fields, to cultivate their excitement about innovation, and to maybe perhaps someday engage them in problems that matter to public service. It's I think, so critical, and in particular, we've been focused on a population that's core to the department, that is the dependence of our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. We've been trying to push science education into their schools and trying to create additional opportunities for those folks because we owe it to our community. So today, hopefully, I told you a little bit about where we're going, how we're trying to shift our culture to a focus on innovation, while we're leaning forward into adopting novel technologies, hoping to disrupt ourselves before others disrupt us, how we're focused both in terms of growing our own organic capability, but also leveraging fast-paced capabilities from exterior, how we're focused on trying to avoid technology surprise while still creating technology surprise for others, and both leveraging new technology sources and at the same time trying to grow our critical core competencies. If I could. On the last chart, I just want to point to the, if it will come up, I guess it won't. I did have on the last chart the Defense Innovation Marketplace. We've collected all the resources that the department has focused on solicitations, on data sharing, on IRAD. We've tried to put those all in one place to make those much more available to folks. I encourage you to look at that as an opportunity to help understand where the department's going and how you can engage us and help shaping our future. Thanks.
Okay, Steve, I have many more questions than we have time. So let me start with one to follow on. You talked about time to market matters. You've got an audience here of a lot of industry folks. Particularly, you have a lot of small and mid-sized businesses. So how do they get their ideas in front of the department? If I hear it once, I hear it a lot. It's really hard to break in, to get an idea in front of somebody like you or to get a contract. What's your advice?
So these outreach activities that we've had, the centers in Boston and the Valley are experiments, and they're experiments with trying to open ourselves up to folks in new ways. These are we've often talked about this as being Sherpas, as folks that go out and help escort somebody with a good idea and connect them with the folks in the department who have requirements and dollars. I think that's an important role. They'll do some contracting on their own. They've got some new models that they're thinking about. But trying to break down those barriers is a key focus of ours. One of the things I'm very excited about that's in the current bill, something that we requested and has shown up in both authorization bills, is a new commercial mechanism for solicitation that allows us to go out with a solicitation that's broad, that's open for a long period of time, and allows us to catch commercial ideas, to be able to procure prototypes, experiments, to be able to acquire licenses for evaluation of commercial products. It's a capability that hasn't existed before, and I think that's going to dramatically reduce our time to market with capabilities.
All right, terrific. That is something I had not heard of. Another thing that you talked about, of course, is the third offset strategy. And you were very eloquent in talking about the first and second offset strategies. We, of course, all know the GEOINT nexus with the second offset strategy really enabling precision strike. Where do you see the play between GEOINT and the third offset strategy?
Well, I think that I tried to make that case around autonomy and the requirement for data, but almost everything we think about Any capability that might offer fundamental sustained advantage is going to be data intensive. And I think that's a fundamental difference in the way that we've thought about systems in the past. In almost any domain that we think about, we're assuming that we're going to be able to take advantage of large data, both as priors for how we learn and train, and to be able to ensure that systems have both onboard and network capability to reach back and understand the world around them. When we talk about autonomy, we're really talking about systems that interact with their environment, and that's mediated through data layers. I think this community has been wrestling with those kind of problems in other domains. So I think there's lots of emerging opportunities to help influence and shape where this third offset's going.
Good, because I know there's a lot of interest in this room. Okay, the ASD for R&E may be an AT&L, but I don't think he can fix the acquisition system. And there's a whole lot of questions here about acquisition. Let me try and sum it up. Can the acquisition system work in the R&D environment that you are talking about?
I think that we've been trying to. Well, first off, we're continuously subject to congressional reform of the acquisition system, but I think folks underappreciate the amount of energy and effort that the department has applied to internal reform efforts to help shape our acquisition system. And those efforts have been working. The data has shown kind of a remarkable turn over the last few years in terms of cost and schedule on performance on major programs. And I credit a lot of that to the Better Buying Power initiatives that were originally started by Dr. Carter when he was AT&L, and that Undersecretary Kendall has been driving kind of relentlessly for the last few years. We're now in the third iteration of Better Buying Power, and if you read those documents, Better Buying Power is all about speed and innovation. It's trying to reduce bureaucracy. It's trying to incentivize much faster pace of engagement. It's a large enterprise and it doesn't turn as quickly as we like, but I do think that writ broadly across the larger acquisition system, I think I do see us turning to be much more focused on rapid tech insertion, much more focused on being more agile. And I expect that under any future administration, those focuses are going to continue.
Well, I know that's music to a lot of folks' ears, myself included. So a lot of focus on Silicon Valley and now Cambridge in trying to get commercial industry here. But here's an interesting question. Are you looking at ways to license government technology that's already been bought and paid for, and it's on the shelf, if you will, it's within the department, to license that back to industry? So recouping some of the R&D funds that have already been expended.
Yeah, let me just very quickly, let me just say that I hate the continuous drumbeat about Silicon Valley, right? We use that as shorthand for centers of innovation. But quite frankly, all interesting ideas don't emerge from the area around the San Jose airport, right? It's quite frankly, we have got amazing communities all across this country in Research Triangle, in Austin, you name it. I won't leave anybody's hometown out. But we need to be smart about how we reach out to all those communities, not just to quote the Valley. And that's a shorthand that people are using, and often it gets misinterpreted. But I'm very excited about tech transfer. I give out an award for Scientist of the Quarter. It's an interesting competition across the whole body of work that goes on in the department. Last quarter, we awarded to a Navy scientist who's involved in 3D printing, but 3D printing of cells. He's building large, complex cellular structures by basically using explosives to fire cells into contact with each other and forcing these complex assemblies to grow together. This gentleman is now a profit center for the Navy. His lab and most of the labs around him are fully funded by the licensing rights we get from the patents that have been developed in that laboratory. And at the same time, he's serving a very critical naval mission. I think there's lots of opportunities to do that, to encourage tech transfer. This year, we've now begun to instantiate a program of doing commercialization training in all of our laboratories to kind of look at that technology that's on the shelf, all those patents, those trade secrets, all that capability that we have, and start to find ways to push that forward. We've built boot camps for many of our researchers to help them better understand the mechanisms for moving that IP into use, because it does no one any good sitting on the shelf. And so we've been publishing kind of plain language guides to accessing government IP. We've been trying to train our folks, and we've been devoting resources and time. We've been shifting people's incentive structures to encourage them to reach out and get that stuff moving.
That's terrific. You mentioned the labs. So what is the role of DOE, the DOE national laboratories, in your quest for innovation?
I think we're deeply engaged with the DOE laboratories in their particular domains of expertise. You know, it's interesting to kind of look at this mix of what we do in-house, what do we do engage with the Department of Energy, what we do with the commercial sector, how we drive the industrial base, our traditional industrial base, what happens in academia. And there are things that are critical core competencies for the department that nobody else is going to do. And those have to reside in our laboratories. We've got to maintain those critical core competencies. We also need to be a smart buyer, and that requires us to make sure we stay cognizant and aware of those adjacencies around us that we want to engage. And the DOE also offers a critical source of capability. We've got some very exciting programs with the department, particularly in countering WMD. That's an area where we have very deep ties to the Department of Energy. Our own folks, my folks at DITRA, all working together to solve some enormously complicated problems. And so we see DOE as a critical national capability, and we hope to access that just like we access all the others.
And we do need to take advantage of everything and everyone who is out there. Speaking of that, and this will be the last question, you talked about STEM, you talked about the workforce of the future. As a woman engineer who graduated a few years ago, there still are not, in my view, enough women and minorities entering into the STEM or STEAM fields. What is the department doing to encourage that? And really across the board, just to encourage our young folks. I mean, you talked about this a little bit, but can you give any specifics?
Yeah, I'm enormously concerned about increasing the diversity of our national STEM capability. Every person that feels that it's not for them is a loss to our larger technical community. And we need both that diversity of ideas, that diversity of experiences, and we can't afford to lose any talent just because folks don't see a community that's welcoming to them. The department's been very engaged both in terms of curricular development. Just a week ago, Dr. Biden, the Vice President's wife, held a meeting down in Pensacola to congratulate DoD for bringing advanced placement science and mathematics courses to 200 high schools that are affiliated with DoD bases globally. And next year, we're going to roll out a computer science program in all those schools. This lifts not just the children of dependents of DoD folks, but also lifts the communities around them. And we see that as a very effective way to reach out within our authorities, and we're not the Department of Education, but still to be able to make a difference. The other thing that we have enormous opportunities in is kind of driving the kind of activities around the school day. Just in the last few weeks, I've participated in the National Math Counts competition. I was out at the first robotics finals in St. Louis, which was just fantastic, and an enormously diverse body of students out there, an enormously amazing body of students out there. And then just this weekend, I was out with AIA for their national rocketry competition. Those kind of engagements, the small seed corn that the department can provide to those, I think offers enormous lift. And then finally, of course, the things we're doing to support non-traditional institutions, historically black and minority colleges and universities, all of which are trying to ensure that folks think about STEM as an attractive and opening career so that someday they can join us in terms of shaping that future.
Well, I know that there are many in this audience who are focused and focusing their energies on encouraging our young folks. Glad to hear that you are visible and you are out and about. Steve, thank you so much.
Sure.
Terrific job.
Sure. Happy. Thanks, Tish.